Shalom. I am David. I am a two-house Torah observant believer in Yeshua, and I have a story to tell. I haven't shared it with many people, but now I believe it is long overdue and someone needs to hear it. Many friends and family think I've become part of a cult or become Jewish, so here it goes. I want to start off by saying that English is my second language, which I didn't have much exposure to until I was about 6 years old. Church life was practically my life. I was born into a Christian household and raised in modern churchianity. I was taken out of Sunday school, and from a young age I would tune into the main sermon. I was integrated into youth groups, music practices, and advanced Bible study groups from about the age of 10. And all that knowledge was vain and without root, and it manifested later in my teenage years. I had left home and abandoned my Christian principles and wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. It didn't go well for me, and many times I went without food. I know it sounds cliche. I humbled myself and went back to my father's home, and they took me in again, and I started my life again. I started integrating into another churchy community, from that church to another church in a couple of years. I was introduced to the woman who would later become my wife. At this time I was employed at the church I was attending at the time, in the graphics department. So logos, symbols, editing, they were things I enjoyed. Translating and multimedia, event coordinating were also some other departments that I was involved in, and I enjoyed it a lot. Not long after getting married in early 2011, my employment ended and we deviated from church. We had many hardships, we separated for a time, and we were nearly at the point of divorce. I started working at a few different jobs, and in particular one as an assistant for a handyman. We're doing diverse trades, and when I was competent, we started up a partnership together. Here then is where my spiritual journey begins. When I was a child of about 5 years old, I had a reoccurring dream very frequently. In my dream I was a boy walking up towards a pulpit. Everything was dark, and there was an open book on the pulpit. And I would wake up just as I got to it, and it didn't mean much to me. It may have influenced my inclination towards events and performing arts. I left it at that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in late 2011 my marriage was falling apart, and I found an old book my father once gave me called The Ring of Truth by J.B. Phillips, which is the testimony of a New Testament translator. And I thought, I picked it up, I started reading it, and there was a line in the first chapter that changed everything. There are 1,100 known human languages, and I learned of the attempts to translate the Bible, or at least parts of it, into nearly all of these different tongues. I learned of the extreme ingenuity which the translator must use to convey sense and truth where a word-for-word transmission is out of the question. Now, looking back at this, it made sense. In my time as a live event translator for English-Spanish and Spanish-English, I learned of the difficulties of conveying words and idioms. Even the jokes, some were untranslatable. Just, I'd have to say, hey, he told a joke, laugh. Oftentimes I'd have a personal doctrinal disagreement with what I was supposed to be translating, and I couldn't translate it. And so I'd stay quiet, or I'd change the message. Now, I'm aware Jim Staley made a similar reference in one of his teachings, and it's true, it happens. This book, it made me realize something that I had ignored my entire life. That the Bible was not originally written in English or Spanish. And when God spoke to Moses, they weren't speaking English or Spanish. And when Yeshua came, he wasn't speaking English or Spanish. This was huge for me. So my thought process was, well, what does the word God mean? It always was so ambiguous and abstract, and I felt I had no relationship or connection with this entity. I checked the dictionary. And so I looked up, God. It says deity. That makes less sense to me. So I went to deity. What does it mean? It says God or goddess in a polytheistic religion. I said, this can't be right. And I said, what is the name of this God that I've been professing to serve all my life? And I couldn't answer the question. And in my thinking at the time, well, the next question was, okay, well, I don't know, God's name is Jesus, right? And I checked the dictionary, and no reference. So I said, I checked another dictionary. There is something there. He says, Greek origin, Son of God. I said, oh, this can't be right, because now it's referring to God as in deity, as in polytheistic religion. And I said, what is his real name? Who is this person? And why is his death so significant? If I can sin and say sorry, and I'm okay again, why am I disrespecting him by calling him something else that isn't his name? And I couldn't think of where to look. I didn't pursue this thought, and it really annoyed me to say that name. So now I say Yeshua. My next thought, if things can get lost in translation between two modern languages, such as Spanish, English, how much am I missing out on? If we consider that Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, they're ancient languages. What does the Bible say in its original language? Is this all maybe just a man-made delusion? But what about the experiences I've had up until now? There were a few. And so in an attempt to save my marriage and my faith, I said, God, whoever you are, I want to know who you really are, and if you're real, because everything I was taught my whole life doesn't make much sense right now. I said, at this point, everybody that I know who has been a significant somebody for the faith, in one context, has made the claim to at least have read the Bible cover to cover, at least once, yeah? And so I said, God, I owe you that. And if I don't find you there, then I'm never going to open this book again. I didn't know what I got myself into. And so not knowing how to speak or read Hebrew, I got the Bible commentary by Dr. Chuck Missler, and started from Genesis 1, because he stood out as being more in depth than a few other ones. There was a few that I checked out. The journey began in early 2012, but I was a bit slack and on and off, and sometimes there was just too much information and I'd get overwhelmed and I'd leave it and start again, and I made a good honest intent by about 6 months later, mid 2012. And many of my questions began to get answered. But new questions started coming. At this time, we weren't congregating at any particular church. Our marriage was recovering, and most of our learning at this time came from online teachings, which came mostly from people like David Diamond, Armando Lucien, Antonio Volanes, Paul Washer, Rob Skiba, 119 Ministries, Jim Staley, Unlearn, Emanate, just to name a few. But we were invited to a particular church one day, and we bumped into an old friend, Pablo. I hadn't seen him since I was about 5 years old. I'll come back to this. After some time, I got to the book of Leviticus, and here I found Yeshua in the sacrifices. This is where I began to appreciate the significance of his death, and it changed me. It changed my outlook on a lot of things. There was a particular night I got through the chapter 11 of Leviticus, and the dream came back, the recurring dream. This time it was a bit different. Similar to the original, it was me walking towards a pulpit from backstage. It was like a theatre. This time I was older, taller. Everything was dark, the lights were dimmed, there were spotlights. I could see red chairs, but they were all empty. And as I came to the pulpit, I saw that it was my Bible that was opened. And on the left side of the page, there was the whole Leviticus chapter 11. But laid out as though it was chapter 1. And in the same manner, on the right side of the page, there was the whole chapter 11 of Romans, also laid out as though it was chapter 1. And I said, this can't be right. This isn't even a real Bible. How am I supposed to share anything from this? And instantly there was a little tap on the shoulder. I didn't look behind me. And the gentle voice said, check your notes. So there was a note on there on the pulpit, and it was my handwriting, and it said Psalm 1. And I was just about to say, this doesn't make any sense. I woke up. So I shot out of bed, grabbed my Bible, read Leviticus 11, something about food restrictions for the Jews. And it says, be holy for I am holy. It doesn't make any sense. Then I went to Romans 11, something about the Jews not being rejected and grafting in. That doesn't make any sense. And so I went to Psalm 1. It says, delight in the law, being like a tree. And there's a contrast to chaff. I said, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. And so I thought to myself, I should maybe check the original text, as that I had been learning. So I thought, all right, I'll start with Psalm 1. It's short. What changed? Wow. It's delight in the Torah of Yehovah. It wasn't simply law, as I had learned from my studies leading up to this. And in Leviticus, the Torah and law are always synonyms. So Torah is instructions. The law can mean many things in Hebrew. And it said meditate in the Torah. And I said, meditate, okay. And the word meditate being to chew the cud. And so there's the connection to Leviticus 11. So if I chew the cut to be acceptable and holy, since it says in Leviticus at the end of the chapter, be holy for I am holy, I must also split the hoof, which implies the walk. Walking implies a way. And then Psalm 1:6 says, for Yehovah knows the ways of the righteous. I said, therefore I would be as a tree planted by rivers of water. And I needed to consider, okay, well, Romans 11 also talks about the tree. But before we get into the tree, it says that the Jews are not rejected. And I've always been told that the law still applies to the Jews. But if they're not rejected, and the law applies to them, and Psalm 1 is not ethnic specific, then, and the Leviticus 11:2 says that to the children of Israel, not the Jews, then in verse 17:25 of Romans it talks about the natural branches being cut off and everyone has to graft back in equally. So then this law stuff applies to me also. There's a process, there's a protocol, there's, and so this was impacting me and creating more questions, and I didn't know who to talk to. By mid-2013, I had stopped clean-cut shaving, and I began to be affected by the foods I was eating, unwillingly. My mum used to make pizza on my birthdays, and this year, 2013, I could barely eat it. And it was making me nauseous, and after my birthday, I was unsatisfied. I said, no, let's go. Let's get some pizza, some pasta, and we'll make it good again. And I forgot to tell him to take the ham off, because I sort of wanted to and I didn't want to. But anyways, the pizza came, it had ham on it. I thought, I'm not going to chuck it. It's food. And so I ate a bit. It made me sick to my stomach, and so it hurt, but we made the decision. That's it. No more unclean food. We're gonna respect the Leviticus 11, and from here on. Over a few weeks, I began to stop working on the Sabbath as much as I could. I began to wear a head covering. Maya began to wear a skirt, and my beard started to grow. Beginning of 2014, we were feeling a bit lonely. We decided to check out a church that was more old school, who put more emphasis on holiness, and so we thought they would be more faithful to the word. And the misconceptions began. Not so much at church, surprisingly, but family, friends. You become an ignorant Jew. You've fallen from grace. You're an Adventist now. Are you in a cult? You look like a crazy person with a beard. Yeah. And despite, we're going to this church, and you're still saying these things just because of the way I look and because of what I choose not to eat. Anyways, the church wasn't very confronting about these things, and so we consulted the pastors about clean eating and the feasts. There was the blood moons that were coming up. They didn't have many answers, and they said, "No, that's for the Jews. Don't worry about it." Regardless of their position, we still wanted to get involved with this church. But we weren't allowed to until we underwent a doctrinal beliefs study. So this went on for a few weeks, and little things began to bother me, specifically from the weekly services. There were scriptures that they started to take out of context to make their point. They'd be reading passages in scripture and skipping over a verse or two if it had any indication that the original context was for Israel. And I would think to myself, he's changing it. He's changing it. If he had just read those two verses, then he wouldn't be able to make the point he's making with the rest of his message. It really annoyed me. And but one of the last, over the period of weeks, one of the last study points in this doctrine booklet came up where we were required to hand over bank details so that the tithes and offerings could be direct debited, which funnily enough didn't even go to that church. It went to a organization that would then redistribute to this church franchise. And I said, but I thought that law stuff was for the Jews. And you're asking for tithes. There wasn't an answer. It's what it is. We didn't proceed with the study. We said, no, I think that's enough. So we became infrequent visitors at this church. I just about had enough. And not to mention that they kept saying that name and I couldn't stand it. In early 2015, they had a little conference. And I was allowed to assist in setting up, and whilst in the parking lot with a couple of the pastors and some of the long-time members, one of the members asked the pastor, and he says, this guest speaker we're having, is he going to be with everybody during the praise and the worship session? And the pastor said, are you crazy? You think he's going to come here and he's going to be among the people? He's going to make an entrance. When it's his time to talk, he'll come in and he'll talk. And I killed it for him. And I said, that's it. I'm done with the cult. That's it. And so it was early 2015, and the first of the 7 feasts were coming up, which was Passover. And I think it was also the 3rd blood moon. We didn't have any lamb, but we did what we could. We downloaded a little Seder booklet. Didn't understand much of it, so we skipped through most of it. And something that the Orthodox Jews can take 6 hours to do, we got through it in about 15 minutes. So we continued our home study, visited a couple of old churches that I'd once belonged to just to see, and there wasn't anything there for us. We had filtered out a lot of the teachings we were getting, online stuff, and we started to attend the Tuesday night prayer group. It was a little small group. There were a lot of people from different congregations that would join in. I wasn't at ease. I wasn't satisfied, and just to reinforce all this deception I was feeling, an online friend of mine promoted a book called Pagan Christianity, and so I happily went and I bought it. It raised many issues. As someone who had worked in performing arts and event managing, lighting, sound, multimedia, schedules, setting the mood, etc. And I realized how much of an emotional circus the church service had become. And I haven't gone to a circus since. About May 2015, the little business partnership left me $30,000 in debt. And my best friend's business partner was now in another country with my 30,000. It didn't end well. It was a big surprise. This began to drive me crazy. I was obsessed. I wanted revenge. I went to the legal system and they wouldn't do anything because he was overseas. And so I made plans to go after him myself. And I twisted some very specific scriptures to justify the reasons for me going after him. And I bought tickets for mid-August. And I wasn't sure if I was going to come back or not. But it was about mid-July, and I got a really bad migraine one night. Worse than I'd ever had. The medication didn't help, and the sleep didn't either. I took a nap, and when I woke up I was in a cold sweat. And all I could think of was a little leaven, a little leaven, a little leaven. It was resounding in my head. And so I did a search because I could barely concentrate my eyes, and I found two references. And the first one I checked was in Galatians 5:9, and I started reading from verse 7. It says, "You were progressing beautifully. Who confused you not to obey the truth? Your persuasiveness is not from him who called you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I trust as to you in our Master that you will not consider other beliefs, but that the one troubling you shall bear the judgment, whoever he may be." I finished reading, and the throbbing migraine disappeared instantly. At the following prayer group meeting, I requested a special prayer. I explained everything that had happened regarding this person and my intentions, and about the migraine message. I was sent off to pray on my own, and the group prayed at the same time, and we both received 3 messages. So here goes, my messages. Number 1, the oppressing spirit is named obsession. Number 2, forgive your brother. Number 3, I am your recompense and your retribution. And their messages was, you're being oppressed. You do not have permission to fly. Beware the black book. And so they prayed for me. There was some liberation, and I agreed not to fly, and I waited. After the original flight dates had passed, my sister told me there was a group of crazy people with long beards who kept the Sabbath and didn't eat pork, and thought I might be interested in checking them out. So she gave me the details, and sure enough, we rocked up unannounced. It was Pablo's house. We were very excited. We were there for the Shabbat. I had a lot of questions. They had a lot of answers. And at the end of the night, we left, and we were halfway to our car, and I heard a voice that I had heard in my dream. And he said to me, "This family is the reason you're here, and not somewhere else." And so that gave me a lot of shalom. The following Sabbath was Yom Teruah. We then had Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot. And so on the first night of Sukkot, I felt moved to share this whole testimony with everyone that was there. And I got to this point, and I said, "That's our answer." They said, "Beware the black book. We're done. We're done with the black book." So we stayed. We stayed in this congregation. We got fed. We got baptized. We had a little Pinyon Chaben. And we had an unplanned Hebrew wedding just to renew our vows, and this is a day or two before our flight. We had a lot of fun. The flights had been postponed till about April. We ended up going. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and she was told not to fly because of 2 internal hemorrhages in her womb. But thank Abba that they disappeared. Just after she got checked out when we got there. We were gone for 45 days. We ended up staying a year. So I took the time to track down my former business partner. Went to see him where he was staying, and I felt pity. And I forgave him the debt, and I shared with him the things that had happened to me since he left, and some of the new things that I had learnt, and at least he listened. I had the dream again sometime after we got back home from that flight. Again, I was walking up to the pulpit, same as before, and I knew what was going to happen this time. And so I got there, and I just stopped, and I looked, and I said, "Who am I speaking to if these chairs are empty?" There was no tap, but the voice spoke to me, and he said, "The seats are for those who need to hear your story." And in consideration of recent events, I can comprehend speaking to an empty theatre. Anyways, it's now been a few years since all this happened. Very long overdue. Abba has been pressuring me lately, and so here it is. I wanted to make mention that I have omitted a lot of details and a lot of events, just to avoid defaming and staining reputations. But there are those that need to be honored in my story that have been instrumental in my walk, and so I would like to thank my wife. She has been immensely patient, and she's given a lot of support all these years. Thank you to my parents who have never abandoned me, even after so many times I've caused so much shame. Thanks to my sisters and their families. Thanks to my great friend Carlos, who's no longer with us. Thanks to the Alencastre family, Romero family, Torres family, Cuadros family, Fuentes families, and Barchavedian family. May YHVH bless all of you for your loving kindness towards me and to my house. Shalom.